Alright, today we're going to be talking about color. How we see color, how our eyes blend color and make colors for us. Let's start with our module today. Looking at the color module as we go through it, we're going to be talking about different types of color, primary and secondary colors. Maybe start thinking about all those words you already know about color. Mary Cassatt loves color. Color is one of those elements of art that can be found just about everywhere in the world around you. We're going to get a little excited about it by checking out this video.
Imagine a world without colors. No thanks. Wherever you may be, there are so many colors to see. It starts with the primary colors yellow, red, and blue. Mix them up and make secondary colors too. Don't forget the tertiary ones. These colors blend primary and secondary tones. What a way to step up your color game. There's almost too many colors to name. Like in this sunrise, colors can be warm. But wait, colors can be cold too. Watch them transform. Some colors pop. We call them complementary. They lend each other a helping hand, like musicians in a band. The color wheel is a useful tool. It can help you with this rule. Take a ride to the opposite side. That is where you will find a color's good friend. It's one and only match till the end. Colors can make you feel different emotions. Do you feel happy like these flowers? Or restless like a wavy ocean? Tint your hues with the color white. You'll make pale colors like this pink. Add a hint of black or a dab of gray. Changing up pure color can change how the viewer thinks. Color can be neutral or intense. Crank up the color cause we prefer it loud, but that's just our 2 cents. Go on, use some color, a little or a lot. What colors will you use in your next work of art? Grab your brush and palette. Give it all you've got.
So we're going to talk about color in ways that maybe we don't have to rhyme, but maybe we'll have a little better understanding of how they actually work together and how that color wheel is arranged and why it's important. So we're going to look at how artists use color in art, look at different types of colors. We're going to look at creating some artwork this week. We're going to start by making a color wheel of our own. We're going to do something kind of unique with that. We're going to look at that principles of design and artwork. Yeah, a little bit. But we're really going to look at how artists use color to affect the mood of a work of art, to affect our movement of our eye in the work of art, maybe to create excitement or a focal point. So we're going to take a look at how all of these different things play into that term we call color. So there are a few different color concepts we're going to be looking at today. The first is primary and secondary. Those primary colors are the 3 colors that make up all the other colors: red, yellow, and blue. From red, yellow, and blue, we make all the other colors that we have access to. If we mix 2 primary colors, we get a secondary color. So for instance, when we mix yellow and red, we get orange. When we mix red and blue, we get purple. When we mix blue and yellow, we get green. So green, orange, and purple are what we call those secondary colors. There are warm colors, and warm colors are things that might make us think of things that are warm, like fire or the sun. And warm colors can be like yellows and oranges and reds, those colors that look like they might be hot or warm. Cool colors are going to give us the impression of coolness, like grass or water. So cool colors are going to be things like blues and greens and a lot of purples. When we look at the color wheel, it's important to understand how those colors are arranged so that we can recognize where all the colors belong in that color wheel and how they share relationships with each other. So It's important that orange be located between yellow and red on the color wheel so that we can recognize that yellow and red make that orange. It's important that purple be between red and blue, and it's important that green be between blue and yellow, because those are those colors that mix. The other reason it's important to make sure we have those colors in the proper spot on the color wheel is then we can identify what we call those complementary colors. And complementary colors are two colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel. If we look at orange, what's opposite orange? Well, blue. So blue and orange are complementary colors. Red and green are across from each other on that opposite sides of the color wheel. Those are complementary colors. Red is complementary to green. And same with yellow and purple. The reason these colors tend to pop is essentially we sort of have three different types of receptors in our eyes for color: red, yellow, and blue. So when we look at, let's say, green, our blue receptors and our yellow receptors are both working together to make that green, to blend that green for us. The red is just sitting doing nothing at all by itself because it's not involved in making that green. But when we put green next to red, now all of our receptors have to work simultaneously but do very different things. The red's just looking at red, the blue and the yellow is looking at that green, and it sort of causes what we call a vibration, or creates sort of this very exciting relationship between those complementary colors. When we talk about value, we're talking about how light or dark a color is. If we add white to a color, we get something called a tint. If we add black to a color, we get something called a shade. Tones are those values of the color that we've added gray to create all the little tones that represent those tints and those shades. When we talk about hue, hue is just a fancy word for color. It essentially just means color. And when we talk about intensity, we're thinking about how much they often talk about the saturation, or how much of that color is in that color. And so let's think about the intensity of the greens here. So they're saying the highest intensity is that light green, the medium intensity is that sort of darker green, and the low intensity is that very, very dark green. And so we can sometimes associate the brightness and the dullness with that intensity, how intense that color is. The brighter it is, generally we refer to that as more intense. So now we can look at how those color concepts apply to actual art. When we look at the primary, secondary, warm, and cool colors as they're being used in this work, this is Love Song by Sir Edward Burne-Jones. We can see that the artist is using lots of reds, lots of blues, lots of yellows, greens, and oranges, lots of primaries and secondary colors, even a little bit of purple there above the young lady's head on the right. Not only is the artist using lots of primary and secondary colors, we see lots of tones, lots of tints and shades. If we look at the dress that the young lady on the right is wearing, that red goes from a very sort of bright tint where they've added white to create the highlights of the dress, to very dark shades, or those tones of that red that are very dark in the shaded areas. When we look at the complementary colors here, looking at the use of purples versus yellows or reds versus greens, we can kind of see, to a certain extent, a little of this green in the background versus this red here. And so it sort of creates a little interest with that bright red kind of popping out. Talking about those values, again, looking at the tints and shades that range from that light pink to those dark reds that we see, those burgundies in this person's Cardinal Fernando. This is the use of that value to create the idea of shading and shadowing. We can see the shadow areas. The color gets less intense, more dark. we see in those bright areas where the sun is catching it, or the light is catching the fabric, the color is more intense or brighter. When we look at the intensity here, you can see how it sort of affects the tone of the mood. On the left, it almost has a sort of a brighter appeal. It has more energy and a little more exciting. On the right, the tone and the intensity is very muted of the color, and it kind of makes it feel like it's more somber or less exciting to a certain extent, maybe. So when we look at how artists bring these thoughts together to complete their work, you can think about how the artist might have solved some of this, and they kind of get away from color here a little bit, and they're talking more about proportion and practicing proportion, and we are going to talk a little bit about that in our work for next week. We're going to look at the proportions of the head and the body. One of the ways we're going to do our color wheel this week is we're going to look at maybe doing a portrait color wheel as an option. It's kind of a neat thing, but we're going to look more at how those proportions fit in with people in our make day next week. And so we're going to take a look at how the color that we are going to be using. Let me go to my PowerPoint here. How we're going to be using color this week is we're going to be looking at how we create a color wheel. And when we do, we're going to look at making sure we have our placement where everything belongs, but also we're going to look at the idea of identifying and labeling where those warm colors are. If you notice, warm colors stay on one half of the color wheel and cool colors sort of on the other half of the color wheel. We can kind of notice that those tertiary colors, and we've not really talked about those yet, but when we mix a primary color like red with a secondary color like orange, we get red-orange. It's what we call a tertiary color. So we're going to look this week, and we do our color wheel, at how we make sure we get our placement correct so we can understand what colors we mix with another color to get the color that we want. We're going to look at how those colors play with each other and how they arrange with one another. If you look at sort of how these little pyramids or triangles, I should say, of color work, the primaries identified in a triangle, the secondaries are identified in a triangle. You can identify tertiary values in those little triangle patterns. We're going to look at how you can mix two complementary colors to get a muted or neutralized color, like a brown or a gray, and how that concept that it is. Again, think about our eyes see color, or how we mix and blend those colors. If I take red and now mix it with that green, all those colors blending together create a very neutral, very sort of brownish gray color. We're going to look also excuse me, at the idea of analogous colors, colors that are next to each other on the color wheel, share a very visually appealing color relationship. Those colors work very well together. They look good together. We're going to look at how we can blend color, mix color, create those tertiary colors, create those secondary colors, and do so in a couple different ways. If you are going to be using color pencils, maybe you're going to look at how you can blend your color pencils so that you can take just 3 colors of pencils, red, yellow, and blue, and get a very broad range of color. The same way with paint or watercolor. If you're using those regular materials, let's not break out every color we own this week. What we're going to do is look at how we take 3 basic colors, red, yellow, blue, maybe adding a little black and a little white to create those tints and shades, but how we can demonstrate the concept of this color wheel. Now again, if you're using Chrome Canvas, Sketchpad, one of the online programs or digital programs formats, perfectly acceptable. I will probably demonstrate in Chrome Canvas or one of the ones, the lesson. But choose the program that you most want to be able to use. But what we really want to do this week is focus on how we get a functional color wheel. A color wheel that lets us use this color wheel as we go forward to make sure we understand how to mix the colors we want to mix, how to achieve the values we want to achieve, and how to understand how we're going to use that color to create things like that three-dimensionality. Remember when we looked at how we created shapes into forms? We used value. What if that form is now like that ball is now red or blue, not just a white ball? How can we combine the ideas of value with color to create those ranges and those tints and shades and tones of those colors? All right, guys, that's it for our lesson today. I look forward to seeing you on our Make Day. Have a great day.